So let me introduce our guest today. It's a real data analyst, not like me who plays one on the internet. It's Alex Freberg from the channel Alex the Analyst. Welcome in.
Hey, how's it going?
Great to have you, Alex. Thanks for joining us today. And I have you figured out if I am live on LinkedIn yet, or is that not yet?
I don't know. I see you. I see you for sure on YouTube, though. That one is working, and I can hear you.
Okay, great. Everybody can hear me. That's always the classic mistake. One time I started a tutorial video, and I was like half through the demo until I noticed, oh, my microphone didn't work. So that's live streaming, but we have some people here already joining us. And since Alex is a real analyst, you can actually ask him questions. So any questions that you will be putting in the chat, we are happy to answer them. And we'll go from there. So Alex, since you are new on my channel here, let people know what you are all about. And I found you on YouTube, basically.
Yeah.
Let people know a little bit about yourself.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, my name's Alex. Like you said, I have a channel called Alex the Analyst. The whole point of my channel is so that you don't have to go through what I went through when I was trying to become a data analyst, which was I tried to piecemeal together things on YouTube and different websites to try to become a data analyst, self-taught. And it was really difficult. And so my channel is to be like, I'm trying to make a one-stop shop for you to become a data analyst and find all the resources that you could possibly need. That's what my channel is about. For me, myself, I am a data analyst. I work at a Fortune 100 company. I've been a data analyst for about 4 years. I started originally working as, I was working at a behavioral health hospital. So I was in therapy. And so, this transition was really, really odd. Like I was not a computer guy. I didn't know any software. I would not have classified myself as somebody who was tech heavy. And so the fact that I made this transition, it's pretty interesting when I talk to like my friends and family. But I'm completely self-taught. I didn't go to school for this at all. And it was just one step at a time, starting at a nonprofit. I used that healthcare background to work at a healthcare analytics company. And I mostly did that through learning like SQL. That was really the only tool that I had to use or to actually try to get a job with. Of course, I've learned other things like Tableau, Power BI, Scala, Spark, Python, R. So over the years, I've continued to learn, and I still am learning today. And so, I think I've proved that at least for some people, you're able to go from literally knowing nothing to becoming a data analyst and being somewhat successful. I think I'm like, moderate level of success. I still have a long ways to go in my mind, but it's definitely possible. And I think that this field is starting to grow, and there's a lot of people who are wanting to get into it. And so I'm really excited to be here and talk and answer questions and talk to people and see how I can help.
Yeah, cool. I'm looking forward to it. So because our channel is mainly like web analytics, I would say web analytics, but also like measurement, how to build in stuff on websites and so on. With what kind of data do you actually work with mainly?
So I work mostly in healthcare. I work at a pharmaceutical company. So I work a lot with drugs. So everything related to pharmaceuticals, yeah, that's kind of my domain. But I don't work with almost anything web-based, like web analytics based. So I do know a little bit about it, but you would know much more than I would.
Well, it's interesting to me because data analyst, and when people ask me if I'm an analyst, I'm like, yeah, I don't quite know, but I guess we are all working with data in some capacity, and our data is kind of more geared towards how you would be able to optimize and make your marketing better or make your website better. And there's data you can actually measure, and then we can analyze it. But it's interesting that data analytics is so a big, vast field that is out there. And obviously healthcare companies also employ a data analyst, as well as other forms, other industries as well. And
Sure.
the demand is growing because everybody can get more and more data easily captured, easily measured, and therefore these people are in demand. So what is like kind of an example of data you work with? Is it sales data? Is it, I don't know, trial data from some trial that they ran, or could you give us some example?
I can, but before I say that, I just want to say I'm not a representative for my company in any way. I am purely speaking from personal experience. I'm not talking for my company. I just want to say that before I start going. What I will say though is we work with a very wide range of data. It can be PHI, like patient information.
Mhm.
We work with a lot of cancer patients. So we do with a lot of cancer medication, cancer drugs. Um, in the trial realm, yes, we have a whole team that works with trials to help connect pharmaceutical companies to actual patients in hospitals who need our drugs. So there's a whole team that does that. I play a very small part in that. And I've kind of dabbled in that area, but that's not definitely not my main focus of what I do. But the vast amount of data is around drugs. So how effective are drugs?
Mhm.
How many drugs are specific places distributing, that they're buying, that they're selling, that they're using, to know everything that we can possibly know about do we need more of these pharmaceuticals? Do we need less of them?
Mhm.
And I work with a commercial team. I work with a GPO team. Um, I work with a lot of different teams where the data that we're pulling in, that we're looking at, we're cleaning, that we're standing up in these databases, making sure that all these other teams have access to it. So like if our commercial team that's going to go sell our products, they can come and say, hey Alex, what is how often is this drug being used? And I can go in, I can look in the data and I can say, well, for this population and this population, it's being used this much, it's this effective. And so, on a high level, that's kind of the data that I'm working with.
Interesting. Yeah. So let's dive into a question here from it's Sam. What is a typical day like for you? I imagine data analysts spend 80% of their time cleaning data and the rest interpreting it and analyzing it, doing the
Yeah.
visual side. So what would you say about that?
My typical day, it used to be very wide ranging. Like I was the only data analyst on my team for about a year. Now we have three, and so it's my position has changed a little bit. Uh, the day to day is in the morning. I have a stand up with my team. It's not my team, but like the team that I'm on. We do a stand up. We talk about the things that we're working on, our projects, any blockers that we have that might stop this work from coming in. I work very heavily on the ETL side of things. I used to be a little bit not as far into the ETL side of things, but I think I'm a very technical person. And so I slowly have tried to position myself more on the ETL side of things. So I work with the database developers a lot. I work with our data engineers, our data architects a lot. And we're on every day a specific project is going to do different things. But let's say I have 5 to 10 projects on my plate at any time, um, and I'm going to different teams. I'm going to different people that I work with, and we're trying to figure out how to get the data in, how to clean the data, how to do the data mapping. We have to create automated processes sometimes to download data from different locations. So again, just that ETL side of things. I think that for me and myself, my position is a little bit more geared toward the ETL side of things than the data visualization side of things. We
Mm.
have BI developers at our where I work, and they do all of our visualizations. I do play a role in that where if they have questions about the data and stuff like that, I come in and will help advise. Why does the data supposed to look like this? Where does it come from? These things may be important to them, but they're the ones creating the actual dashboards that our clients will use or our internal teams will use. So, as of in this position that I'm in now, I don't do almost any visualization. I'm more of just a background. I help acquire the data.
Okay.
But other than that, I usually, especially now working at home, my day to day looks much different than in person. I have a lot of meetings in the morning, and then I do about an hour in the afternoon of work, and then I work about 4 hours at night.
Oh,
My
okay.
schedule is like super flexible. So like, tonight on a Friday night, I'll be at my desk, working. Um, and it's just super different than when I was in person. Because I would
Yeah.
go over to people's desk and I would talk to them, and we'd go into a meeting room, and we would actually work on a project. And now I just kind of like chat, and I'm like, hey, any update? And it's the day to day communication has changed a lot. But
Okay, and
yeah.
I wonder how is like in a bigger company as you work, and you don't have to particularly talk about your company, but you already mentioned like different kind of positions that people move into that have something to do with data, right? There's a data engineer, there's maybe the visualization guy, and so on. So can you give us an idea of how big like kind of the team is, with how many people you work together, or is it really like you're the only guy doing all this data stuff, right?
Right. We have a pretty big team. If you want to say the immediate team that I work with that are like technically on my team, it's about 12 of us.
Mhm.
But I will say I have my hand or my foot in a different teams, like in a small way. So I would say
Yeah.
close to maybe like 40-ish in reality to the people I actively work with. And it's so wide ranging. We have lots of project managers. We have business analysts, data scientists, data engineers, data architects, BI developers. So just in those 40 people, we have a lot. It's a very wide range, and we all have our kind of our specialty. Some people we call them SMEs, or subject matter experts. So I'm
Ah.
a SME for a lot of different data sources. I know them like the back of my hand. Whereas some other data sources that we use, I have absolutely no idea. And so each person kind of has their specialty, and what they do and what they know.
Yeah, that's kind of my feeling of like web analytics is only a subpart from something that people would even divide further if you were in a bigger company. So somebody who gathers that data, who works with that data, who visualizes that data, and so on. So there are many
Yeah.
different kind of paths you can go down if you are interested in kind of working the data route. So yeah,
Yeah.
let's get into a little bit of a specialty that is kind of on your channel oftentimes. The um, the data analyst role and the data analyst career. How did you actually get into it? You talked a little bit about this, but you also said that you are self-taught in that regard. So
Right.
maybe you could do an abbreviated version of like your
Sure.
career and what you think are your path to get into the position you are now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I have an entire like 15-minute video dedicated to my whole story. I will try to keep it to like 1 or 2 minutes. I'll try to go as super brief as I can. I was working, I moved here. I was working at a behavioral health hospital and decided I wanted to stay. I was going to move back to North Carolina to live with my parents for a little bit, but I met a girl. And so I was like, I got to stay. I was like, this is, she's the one. And I ended up marrying her. And so I really wanted to stay. So I took a job at a nonprofit, basically as a caretaker. I was working as I was getting paid just about nothing. And in that nonprofit, there was a data collection specialist and analyst position that opened up. I had no idea what that meant, didn't know it at all. But what I did know is that I wanted to make more money because I wanted, to make more money for my family. My wife and I had just gotten married, I think, at that time. So I applied and I got the job. The job was basically only Excel and nothing else. It was just collecting Excel, submitting it for grants. That's it. And I basically was like, I've used Excel, so I'm really good at Excel. Here's what I've done with it. And I did. I was pretty good at Excel, but I wasn't amazing at it. I stayed in that job for about 6 months, and that whole time I was only using Excel. And then at the last like 2 months, I found out what SQL was. I didn't even know what it was. And I was like, this guy I was working with was like, oh, do you use SQL? I was like, I don't know what SQL is. What is that? I look it up one night and I'm like, whoa, SQL seems really important. Let me learn this. And I went home, and that night I just started like doing 4 hours a night, every night of SQL, and only SQL. That's the only thing I did for like 2-3 months. And I became pretty good at it. I started applying because I was like, hey, I think I could become a data analyst, whatever that is. It looks like an interesting job. I'll start applying. I started applying, and lo and behold, I got in touch with a recruiter. I didn't know how to work with recruiters. I just like blindly trusted this random person I met online who said they were a recruiter. And so I went to a meeting and I got a job at a healthcare analytics company. And I was an actual data analyst. Like that was my title. And so that was I think that was the biggest job for me, because once I got into that role, they taught me so much more in depth about SQL and how to use Excel and Tableau. And so I learned a ton in that job. And then I used that 1 years to 1.5 years experience, if you want to kind of stretch it, to land the job that I have now, where I've been for over 2 years. And so I would say that in that path, the one thing that constantly has been the best investment of my time has been SQL. And I preach that on my channel because I don't think it's talked about enough. I think a lot of people put a lot of focus on Python. They put a lot of focus on Tableau or Power BI. In my opinion, not enough emphasis is put on SQL, but it's just so incredibly important. And what you can do with it is beyond what a lot of people think it can do. And so I'm like the preacher out there. I'm like, you got to learn SQL. Like, please learn SQL. I'm like, that's what I think is one of the most important things. And so that's kind of been a constant in my career. SQL has been one of the most important skills that I picked up and still continues to be. I use it every day, all the time. And so,
and you are
that's my story.
You have some great tutorials on your channel as well on SQL, and also have a course, right?
I'm coming out with literally. I just finished it last night. It's not a course; it's a portfolio project.
Oh, nice.
So literally next Tuesday or next Thursday, I'm coming out with like a SQL portfolio project, and it's going to go through like a COVID data set.
Nice.
And that's something that's really lacking for a lot of people is, how do I show off my SQL abilities to an employer? And I always say portfolio project, and they're like, well, how do I do that? And I'm like, well, let me show you. So I finally made it. And so that'll be coming out, next week or so.
So we had this question already about the, this was me actually writing, but we had this question from G. Krish. To be a data analyst, what tools must I start with? SQL? What are the skills required to become a data analyst? What would you say?
I think there are 4 main skills to me, and SQL is my number one. And there's so many reasons for that. The first reason is because you're going to use it a lot. It's you have to know how to use relational databases. But also, I think something that a lot of people don't think about is the actual interview process. SQL is asked a lot as a technical interview question. Most people think it's Python, but I would say that the vast majority is actually SQL. Unless it's like a Python only data analyst position, then they're going to ask you Python. But I have found with every interview, and I've done so many interviews, I almost always got asked a technical question on SQL. So that would be the first skill that I would go with. The next skill that I would probably go with is Tableau, because it's just such a good combination of knowing the databases and getting everything in order, and then visualizing it. I mean, it's a perfect combination to just get started really fast. If you can learn the basics of SQL and the basics of Tableau, which I think most people can do in like a month or two, you've already set yourself up really well to have the fundamental skills, and then you can build off of that. You can work in Excel, which a lot of people can pick up pretty quickly. You can start learning some Python, which takes more time. But if you want to get up and running really quickly, that SQL Tableau combo is phenomenal.
Interesting. Do you know, even if there's like a Tableau, I guess there's a test version or something, it now belongs to Salesforce, right?
Yes, but you can do Tableau Public still, and it's completely free. That's going to be the very next thing because like you said earlier, I did a whole SQL tutorial. My very next tutorial series that I'm going to be doing is Tableau, and Tableau Public is what I'll be teaching it on, because it's free, super easy to download. You can upload data there for free. It's all completely free.
So a question that you probably get quite often: Excel, like and data visualization. What are the better tools out there? You already mentioned, I think that Excel is also like a stepping stone for many people, right? To go into SQL or SQL and then go into Tableau and so on. But in terms of tools, is there any recommendation that you would go through?
Well, first off, Excel is super important, and I think it's kind of almost what's the word? It's expected that you're going to know it,
Yeah,
right? It's
prerequisite.
almost right. It's almost like they don't even. Sometimes people, employers won't even ask that in an interview because they just assume that you know Excel, right? Because it's like the very first thing that most people pick up on like a laptop or a computer. So I think Excel is huge. I think you'll use it a lot more than you probably think you will. I use it a lot when I'm handing data off to like non-data analyst people. So if I have to work with a commercial team or the salespeople, they're not going to get into SQL. They're not going to look through my scripts. They're not going to write queries. They just want me to get the data that they request, and I put it in Excel. I format it. I can build. I could do like a some type of graph or something for them, and I send it to them. It's the way that I communicate with other teams, basically, that aren't as data heavy. And so it's super, super important. In terms of visualization, it has visualization capabilities. It doesn't go super advanced, but it's a really good place to start learning how that data actually is visualized. And then I think the next stepping stone to me is Tableau. Tableau / Power BI. I recommend Tableau because I think it's easier to get started. Then there's Python. I think Python is the next step above those. It's obviously a bit more it's much more programming heavy. It's harder to learn. And you can also do R as well. I'm a Python guy myself, so I usually recommend Python. So, that's kind of like the stepping stones in my mind. And yeah, there's no perfect answer to that. It's just, there are a lot of, there's AlterX as well. There's lots of data visualization tools out there that are popular.
I also think that when I look at my when I work with clients, for example, what is the easiest way to grasp that data? In the end, you want to answer questions for them, and you want to be helpful. And oftentimes, people make the mistake to just share a Google Analytics screenshot or a Google Analytics login, and then the client doesn't know what to do. And Excel is kind of I don't know if you would agree with this, but it's still the most used BI tool out there. Even like from a secretary to the CEO, they still know how to use it. And therefore, if you send it in a handy format that they can actually, how did he come up with this number? They can just look up the formula and say, okay, it pulls it from there, kind of makes sense. So when I was working in the startup world, all the investors, if you don't have your spreadsheet ready, and they will go through the spreadsheet, especially people who have worked in consultancies, and they know all the tricks, and then they will cross-reference everything and see if it makes sense, and they're impressed by your Excel skills. So I think that's always like the baseline, and then once you graduate from that and you want to do stuff faster, I guess then it comes also into automation, how much you can pre-program so you don't have to do jobs over and over again. And then the question is how much data you need to change. So going through the ETL process, and then visualizing it. Obviously, you would need to also have like powerful tools, especially when it's asked in a certain direction. But it always depends on who you're working with, who's the recipient of that data, I guess, and then also what data you're working with, because Power BI, it's very convenient if you have it already in the format, or you have it in your Microsoft tools. But it might be better to do this whole thing on Google, on the Google Cloud platform. And they have their visualization tools with Data Studio. If you have your data there, so it really depends on the data and the recipient. So really interesting. Okay, let me go through.
I see a lot of really good questions.
One. How many hours of SQL do I need to put in?
To become a pro, I'm not even a pro, and I use it all day, every day. And there's still things that I learn constantly. I think if you want to become effective enough to get a job, if you want to do it in under a month or about like 2 months or so, be putting in at least like 2 hours or an hour or two a day. That worked with me. I will say that, and take this with a grain of salt, I knew absolutely nothing. I didn't know what a relational database was. I didn't understand it. It was the most confusing thing. I just had to hammer away at it for literally 4 hours a night, every night, and watch a million tutorials. So if you're smarter than me, which there's a high possibility of that being the case, it should not take you as long as it did me. It took me a solid 2 months, 4 hours a night, every night. So you can probably do it in half that time if you're pretty tech savvy or you understand that a little bit better than I do, or I did. And I think with that, you could probably, know joins and subqueries and temp tables and all those things. And you can learn that in very quickly. I think that the best way to do that I don't think doing tutorials and doing YouTube stuff for all that time is the best way to go about it. I would do that until you get to about joins. Once you start learning joins and stuff, try to do like a small little project of data exploration. Do a small project, pull in a data set to your database and start just messing around with it. And you'll ask questions. You'll say, I want to see this. And then you'll have to figure out how to write that in SQL. And you'll just learn it 10 times faster. And I wish I had done that when I was learning. I just did a million tutorials and I didn't really progress that quickly. So yeah, that's what I think about that one.
I think that when you're talking about like 4 hours a day or 3 hours a day, it's pretty doable in 2 months. It's kind of crazy how fast you can acquire a skill that is then sellable on the open market, and people are looking for such people who can just put in the 2 months and then are kind of competent in the interview at least, and then you will be able to answer their questions because these kind of, and there are tons of tutorials out there. There are tons of courses out there. Is there anything that you would recommend? Or I mean, you said you have learned a little bit through. Well, what did you use? Did you use YouTube or did you go through a professional course? Do you need a certification in that, or is it just like something that you can learn by yourself on the internet?
Yeah, there used to be a certification from Microsoft that I recommended, but they discontinued it. And now it's just the Microsoft Data Analyst. So certification-wise, there aren't really any certifications that I'd recommend for SQL specifically. I really wish there were, because it's really important. I personally did Udemy most of the time. Self-admittedly, I became quite obsessed with taking courses. I was taking ones on like artificial intelligence, machine learning, Python, R, and I was taking like 6 or 7 a month. It was like, I became obsessed. I recommend, if you are like me, doing something like Coursera, where you can just do a subscription and take as many courses as you want. I think that for me worked really well. There was one course on Udemy. It was just SQL Server. If you search SQL Server, it's the very first one. It's a guy named Philip Burton, I want to say, or something like that. And he did a SQL Server course, and I went through that course like 3 times. And then I did a lot of YouTube stuff as well, through like free MySQL stuff. So I learned different flavors of SQL as well. I learned MySQL, which I use a little bit in my job. I use SQL Server, which I use a lot in my job. And then I also learned PostgreSQL. And so I learned kind of every flavor, and learned the nuances and the differences between each. I don't really recommend that. Just do SQL Server that's what I would do. Okay,
great. And what do you do then once you have learned these skills, or at least SQL? Where do you find an entry-level job? What would you recommend?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, that's the perfect segue to the next question, which is, once you've actually learned these skills, once you know SQL and Tableau, like just the basics, how do you get a job? The very first thing that I would do, and this took me a long time to realize, is that if you live in any type of major city or any city where there might be recruiters, reach out to your recruiters. Recruiters have been the biggest help for me in landing jobs. Even when I had almost zero experience, I was like, hey, I want to get a data analyst job. Here's my resume. And they're like, we'll work with you. We'll see if we got anything for you. I'm like, this is amazing. I have somebody looking for a job for me, basically. And I was working with 7 or 8 recruiters at a time. I was putting my feelers out for everything. That is my number 1 recommendation. The number 2 recommendation is going on LinkedIn and if you find a job on like the LinkedIn job section that you really like, and you're like, I think I'd be a good fit for this like entry level position, reach out to somebody or reach out to the not the hiring manager, but the internal recruiter or somebody that's on that team on LinkedIn and see if you can connect with them. And sometimes you can get a referral, or you can ask them to, pass your information along or something like that. Especially at smaller companies, they're usually much more willing to do that. At larger companies, they have more processes and procedures around that stuff. But that would be my biggest advice is don't waste all your time applying to jobs on like ZipRecruiter and Indeed.com. Try to do a little bit more targeted, work with recruiters, and then kind of focus in on a few jobs and reach out to people.
Cool. And do you know if this is also possible to do as a freelancer? If you're already inclined, let's say somebody is a web designer and says, okay, I want to get into this data thing. I'm going to learn SQL and Tableau and so on. Are there data analyst freelance jobs out there?
There are, but I've never done them. I couldn't tell you how many there are or if they're any good. I'm not much help on that front. There's another guy, and he has a channel. It's called How to Get an Analytics Job. He does consulting and he does freelance. And so, if you want to learn more about that, you can check out his channel. I usually, when anybody asks me about freelance, I throw my hands up. I'm like, I don't know about this stuff. So you can check out his stuff. He has some good videos on those subjects.
Yeah, I guess that there are a lot of jobs out there. Once you have the skills and you put them forward in terms of SQL, I can do Tableau and so on, there might be somebody out there that needs that right now, and maybe just for a one-off analysis because they have that data available and now somebody needs to just go in and write these SQL queries. So definitely there's I can imagine that there's demand for it because on the analytics, web analytics side, there's definitely demand for it.
Right.
And I think that it should be fairly straightforward to land one of these gigs because it doesn't require big of a sales skill of saying like, oh, I will do for this for you, and I need to tease out the information before we can make a sale. So to get your feet wet, I guess there should be some jobs out there, and obviously there are freelancing platforms and so on. So that's pretty cool. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about the differences. So we have already covered like the different people you work with, but one question that oftentimes comes up is data analyst, data scientist. Where do you draw the line? Why do you see yourself as a data analyst and not as a data scientist? And maybe you can kind of also talk a little bit about the specializations that there are in these fields.
Sure. I have a video out there that is one of my more popular videos because it's a huge question. And a lot of people want to jump right into data science. And they want to make like, 100,000 within their first like year. And it's a really competitive field. The biggest difference, if I could narrow it down to one big difference, or maybe two, is data analysts are most likely not going to do anything with machine learning, modeling the data for running them through models. We really won't do much with that. Some might, but it's very rare. It doesn't happen often. Whereas data analysts, they aren't going to work with that stuff. They're going to more be on the data cleaning and then data visualization side. Whereas data scientists typically don't do much data visualization. And that's not all the time. That's not like a broad, this is for every job. But as kind of a generality, that's usually how it is. So the biggest thing to think about if you're looking at these jobs is to look at yourself and really look at yourself and say, do I have the qualifications to become a data scientist or a data analyst? Data scientists typically require more closer to a master's or master's levels abilities. Where data analyst jobs, there's a huge vary. You can go as simple as like a data analyst that's just working with Excel and SQL, or you can get data analysts who are writing a lot of Python. They're using R. They're using those programming languages. And so, as a broad, again, a kind of a generality is, it's easier to become a data analyst than it is a data scientist. And I am walking proof of that. If I tried to become a data analyst 4 years ago, 5 years ago, I don't think I could have become a data scientist. It's just, the more I know about how, because I work with them, the more I know about the work, the level of skill that you need in programming and everything that comes with that, it's just more advanced. I don't think that it's impossible to go from no experience to a data scientist. It happens and people have done it. It's just more difficult in my opinion.
Do you think that you talked about the master's degree? So do you think that university degree is something that they would be looking for at bigger companies when it comes to data scientists, and rather not take somebody who is, or maybe it might be one requirement, but maybe they're also like super skilled people who are in similar fields. But university degree, does it play a role?
It does and it doesn't.
Okay.
Yeah, I saw it when I'm looking at the chat on this right side over here. So a lot of people have been asking about master's degrees. A lot of people have asked about it, and so that's a really good question and kind of a tough question. It's not like becoming like a CPA, right? A CPA, you have to get your master's, you have to take certain tests, and then you can become an accountant, right? Or you get your CPA and you can become an official accountant. That's not how the tech world is just so crazy. It changes all the time. Getting a master's is not a requirement anymore. It is 100% not. If you have a bachelor's, let's say in computer science, and you have, let's say several years of experience as a data analyst, even, you can become a data scientist. As long as you are learning and you can showcase your abilities, it is absolutely possible. It is easier to get a job with a master's, but that's also a huge investment in time and money that you don't have a guarantee of getting that back. So for a master's degree, here's what I generally will say about a master's degree. Masters are fantastic. I want to go back and get one myself. And I know exactly what I want to get it in and when I want to do that. But I've been in the field for 4 or 5 years now, and I've gotten a lot of experience. And so now I know exactly what I want to get that'll further help my career. I think a lot of people want to jump right from a bachelor's into a master's and say, I want to do this because of XYZ, but they don't have the experience to really know exactly what they want. And so what I generally tell people is, if you want to become a data scientist and you want to go that master's route, get some type of data centered job, like a data analyst job for a few years, and see if you really want to become a data scientist, and then go and get that master's. Get that experience first so that you are sure 100% like this is the path I want to go. Just because otherwise you're going to invest a year or 2 years of your time, tens of thousands of dollars, and then you come out of it and you realize, this market actually isn't for me. I wanted to do a little bit more like this, and then you've wasted your time. So a master's, it can absolutely be helpful. I don't think today, especially, it's a requirement anymore.
Okay, and what does math and statistics, what role does that play? Do you see yourself as a math whiz? I was always bad in math in school, but now I'm doing this YouTube channel about data. So could you talk about this a little bit? Because
Sure.
I think it's a concern for many people when they're thinking about like doing something in the whole data sphere.
Well, let me take you back to my high school AP calculus class. I was an average student. I was nothing special. I made okay grades. I failed some tests. I passed some tests. Got to college. College math is way harder. I did okay. I consider myself okay at math. For what a data analyst needs, I don't think you're needing to know like advanced calculations. You don't need to know like really tough algorithms. Even in data science, sometimes you don't need to know that. And a lot of people don't. They know how the models work in theory, but they don't know the math behind it. I'm not going to call anybody out, but I know for a fact there are YouTubers out there that do data science, and they on their channel, or when I've talked to them myself, they're like, I don't know how that works. And it's not a bad thing. You don't need to know it anymore to get the results to make an impact on the company. Yeah. So math and statistics are important. Understanding the basics is important. I do not think that you need to go crazy in depth. And so for a guy like me who was going down the therapy route, I can honestly say, like, I never studied math. I never studied statistics, but I'm good enough at math to understand how to do basic calculations, and that's been enough for me. And in some cases, I even go too far. it's a kind of that KISS, keep it simple, stupid. It's, with statistics and with math, typically in data analysis, going crazy advanced is not needed. You just need to know the basics for 90 to 95% of the work.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, in some instances, when you need to recommend something on a decision, or you are analyzing that data and you want to express something and you can only express it with doing some advanced calculations, then probably you're hindered if you don't know the advanced math behind it. But oftentimes the paths are already there. You already have a question in mind that you would try to answer, and you know how to get to that point. So you don't have to, again, write a model or some algorithm to get that data crunched. So I guess that's like one of the things that everybody needs to keep in mind when they are working with data. It's kind of, you need to have an affinity, I guess, for data, right? And know and kind of visualize how you can put it together and calculate stuff, but not advanced stuff. And then you're kind of set with the enthusiasm that you need to bring to the whole field.
Yeah.
So cool. Automation. Is there any thoughts about automation, the threat to the data analyst? I mean, there's also a threat to the marketer out there, and automation is kind of eating a lot into what we do, but oftentimes it makes it more convenient. How do you see this in the data analyst field, especially in the future?
Yeah, this is one that I get asked a lot. In 5 years, 10 years, will data analysis or data analysts be automated? I want to say no. And I have, I think a pretty good take on it, which is data is extremely messy, and it is not as pretty as it seems in a database. Typically, it requires a lot of domain knowledge. Talking with, like in my case, talking with a hospital or talking with a doctor and talking with them to understand how they're using the data, how they input the data, how they how they select the data in their actual EMR or wherever, how it comes to us, and then how we transform it. Everything's interconnected, and it's actually a pretty complicated process to get it into the database. Once it's in the database, there are, of course, once it's all structured, it makes it so much easier for automation to occur. And that's why a lot of things are coming out where you can plug in like an Excel, and it'll give you a bunch of like pre-automated graphs and charts and stuff. But to really have an in-depth knowledge of the data and to be able to present that and make an impact on the company, it requires a little bit more than what I think is available right now. So in terms of like, do I think it'll be automated? I do think that some pieces will be automated, especially within the next 15 years. I don't think the data analyst field will be automated soon, though. I'm talking 20 to 50 years out. We'll get some signs where there might be lowering jobs. But I don't see that in the near future. It's just, again, there's so much ambiguity to it that training some type of machine or artificial intelligence or automation to be able to do that work consistently really well is just not, it's not there yet. And again, I work in automation or the ETL side of things, and I know how complicated it can get. And so I think that there absolutely, in almost every domain or industry these days, there is going to be some automation. I just don't think it will destroy the field itself of data analysis.
Yeah, I agree, because in the end, we all are kind of answering questions. At the same time, maybe the machine would be able to answer that question, but we are still the person who need to find out what question to ask in the first place, and then also work with people together to bring this all together. And automation might be then a convenience thing that we might get that question answered faster, but you kind of need to bring it all together in the end. So the field will definitely change, and it's interesting to look at the newest tools that are out there. But I agree, on the data side, it's always, especially when we look at our web data, there's so much automation now, and Google wants to replace all the agencies out there that are doing Google ads for people. But these clients still need to be found somewhere, and these people need to be called and signed up to Google Ads. The automation can only take care of so much, and the problem is you will also only go so far with automation oftentimes. If you want to do something more complicated, it may be good to get started with it, and it may give you some basic insights. But when you really want to understand and ask the real good questions, then you probably need to know the data very well and not rely on what the algorithm shows you in the end, and shows you and says, you should change your website here, or you should do that. Like, who is actually asking that question, and is that valid data there, and did we even pump in the right data into the algorithm in the first place? So it's always an interesting kind of path, and I'm looking at it as well, as we are all in the age now of automation, and there are more and more tools coming out on the automation side, but also like no code and so on. And I think that when we look at SQL and all of Tableau, it's also just an abstraction of something that has come before, right? So Tableau wasn't around forever, and before people were making their charts somewhere else. So we are slowly going in this direction, but everybody will start working with it and learning about it. So I think there's a bright future for data as well. Okay.
I agree.
Let's see. We are almost at time here, so don't want to keep Alex too long as well. Let me see if there's any more questions. There were some questions here, guys, about analytics, web analytics, especially like Google Analytics 360 and so on. I won't ask these, or won't be putting up these questions right now, because it's a bit hard to talk generally about data analytics and then we dive into some very specific Google Analytics stuff or enhanced e-commerce tracking, which is obviously not what Alex is here for. So if you have any more kind of questions there, then let me know. Well, here's one question. What is the difference between web analytics and data analyst, as both work in reporting and visualization? So from my side, I guess web analytics is just a specification for the data, the type of data that you work with, right? And a data analyst, Alex works with many different data sources, and I think he could take his skills over if he goes to another company and works for Google. They would give him some web data, obviously, and then the same principles apply, kind of. So that's why I think the data analyst role is more of a hybrid than web analytics is specialized. And you have people in the team who have the domain knowledge on one or the other data set, right? So that would be kind of the distinction. Or do you have any thoughts on that?
I think you nailed it on the head, to be honest. I think that if you look at it, there's healthcare analysts, there's financial analysts, there's these different variations of analyst, but those types of positions are, again, they're specialized. So if you ask me today, data analyst versus a healthcare analyst, because I'm in healthcare right now, you could call me a healthcare analyst and I'm not going to be offended. It's just a different, it's a focus on a specific domain. Right. Whereas with web analytics, you're working primarily with web data. I don't work with much web data, but if I started working with web data,
you could also digital analyst, because web is also just, if you have an app, if you have I don't know, a point of sale system, that's also digital data, kind of. And the question also is just the tools that you work with, right? So SQL can be used, and we were chatting before. SQL is used nowadays very often in BigQuery. So if you graduate from something like Google Analytics to, I want to do the analysis myself. Previously, everybody was pulling it into a Google Sheet or an Excel file. Then you do your analysis there. But the analysis really like the digging through the data and making sense of it, and then asking the right question and trying to find out the answer to it. And then, you can graduate and now import your data into BigQuery, which is easily possible. And then you have but you have a little bit of a different interface, and you need to know SQL for it, right? And I think then this is totally something that you could port over from a data analyst role to web analytics. And if you're super into the whole web thing and you're like, oh, I build websites on the side and I know kind of how it works, I think that I have probably deeper domain knowledge in like, okay, these are web requests. How does Google Analytics actually put together all that data that you see in the interface, right? And so I understand it better, and therefore I can kind of relate it to the overall position of a marketer and why we would be doing that. So if you're thinking about marketing analysts, web analytics, that's kind of the part. And data analyst is, yeah, it's kind of broad, but at the same time, I think you are working more on the analytics side of things. I'm working, for example, more on the measurement side. So I'm looking forward to like gather more data, see how data gathering mechanisms actually work. Whereas you are working really with the data that is already in the system, right? And then you make it into something.
Yeah. And in the comments over here, G. Krish, if that's how you say it, he asked,
Yeah.
do you need to have a strong domain knowledge to be a data analyst? I think it was just a really good segue into that next question because we're talking about domain knowledge. I think that when you first start out, domain knowledge is not going to be something you probably have a lot of. But if you want to go to that mid-level, senior level, and then become like a manager, the domain knowledge is 100% what you need to know. Like you can know SQL, you can know Python, you can know all these things. But until you really know the data, like you're saying, I would never know how Google gathers that data or puts it together to give to you for the analytics. I would not know any of that. Just like you wouldn't know how to an electronic health record system is input and set. Like we have our own domain and we're good at what we do, but that's because we've been doing it for a while. And so, that's what's going to take me to the next level of my career is just really knowing that domain knowledge. If I were to switch over to, let's say banking or something like that, I probably would not be able to advance as quickly in another domain because I don't know how all that stuff works. I have to relearn it. My skill level is there. Like I know SQL, I know Python, I know all these things, but it's going to take me a while to get that domain knowledge to really like ramp up. Like if I stayed in healthcare. So to answer that question, when you're starting out, at least in my opinion, you're not going to know a lot. But to really advance your career quickly, domain knowledge is super important.
Right. Yeah, he says here, I wanted to enter pharma industry. I'm working towards it. So you have the right guy here. I can only say from my side, I kind of worked as a digital marketer, and then I really became interested in that data kind of side of things and wanted to know how it's gathered. And now I run this YouTube channel and this company around it. So yeah, you can always go deeper. You can always go to the side, and it really depends of where your goals are and where your interests lie as well. And there's interesting data out there, and people there's big government. I think governments should work with data much more. And there's a lot of movement in this whole data field, because now everybody wakes up and says like, oh, I can actually have a data advantage by taking my data and analyzing it and making something out of it. So that's always usually a new kind of frontier for many industries, even if the healthcare industry is kind of a long time standing. They need these kind of results and to prove to the FDA and so on what is going on with their drug. And the banking industry, obviously, there we have a lot of analysts. Digital, we have a lot of analysts, but there are other industries out there that are not yet as discovered, and that might be the next frontier for many of these things. So a bright future here. So okay, we are almost at time here. So let's wrap it up in a second here. I would love to know, Alex, where can people find out more about yourself?
Yeah, you can. I think there's a link in the description. I can't remember. But if not, you can search for Alex the Analyst. My beautiful bald head will pop up right there. You can click on it and you can subscribe to my channel. Like what we were talking about before about my story. If you click on my channel, that's the first thing that pops up. Is my story of how I became a data analyst. It's one of my favorite, by far my favorite video I've ever made, because it's a unique story. And so, if you want to check it out, you can find me there. You can also find me on LinkedIn. Just search Alex Freberg. There's only 2 in America. I know because I messaged. Actually, he messaged me, so I know him personally now. So there's only 2 Alex Frebergs in America. We're pretty easy to find. and you'll see the same exact face on there. So yeah, those are the two places you can find me.
Cool. Yeah, and I would definitely let people I will put the link in the description below if we don't have it, but I think we have it in there as well. And I can only recommend to check out Alex's channel. It opened my eyes to like, okay, there are other people out there doing this data stuff on YouTube. Obviously, this field is growing, and I'm interested in all of the different flavors that are out there. And you kind of publish a video every week, or is it less?
It used to be 2 times a week, and then my job got really busy. I still have a full-time job. And
it's
so
a
now,
hard job,
and so I stopped. I went down to like once a week. Last week I didn't post at all because I'm working really hard on this portfolio project, the SQL one. So I've just been putting all my time into that. But I usually at least once a week. There's maybe like 1 or 2 weeks a year that I don't post a video.
You can use this video and put it up on your channel if you want to. Then you have one for this week as well. That's what I actually did. We didn't publish a video this week, so this is our video for this week.
Perfect.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you everybody for joining us here. We had quite a bit of people asking questions, and I really appreciate it. Sorry if I wasn't able to answer your question specific to Google Analytics or Google Tag Manager. That's probably something we will do in another live stream. But for everybody who has been viewing us from many different channels here, we had people on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. Thank you very much, and I hope you guys have a great weekend. First of all, thank you to Alex, who brought his knowledge and his time to this. And I want to thank everybody who has been tuning in. There's nothing else to say. Just subscribe to the channel, I guess, if you haven't yet. And I hope to see you next time. My name is Julian. See you in the next one.